Guard my soul and deliver me. It tells us in Psalms 25. Guard my soul and deliver me. December 2003 marked a significant low point in my life. I found myself dealing with legal trouble, realizing I was at a crossroads. June 2004, I enlisted in the United States military, leaving behind old life, stepping into a life filled with new structure, discipline, and growth. The experience taught me more of just the importance of transformation, resiliency, and courage, but it made me embark on a new path, much like what we see today when we experience what we're going to go through today in Joshua, the book of Joshua. Have you ever found yourself pondering what it means to be part of an elite force trained for the most challenging missions? This thought can lead us to the idea of God's spiritual warriors, individuals that undergo profound transformations, much like we see in boot camp. Oh, man. You see, arriving at boot camp in Great Lakes was unlike anything that I've ever experienced. It was strict discipline, structured routines, and an emphasis on core values such as honor, courage, and commitment felt overwhelmingly unnecessary. I was placed in a room with 86 other recruits, all encouraged to let go of our individualities. We all made sacrifices, from cutting our hair to learning how to communicate without noise, and a rigorous schedule of waking up early, exercising, and adhering to strict meal hours provided a much-needed anchor during such a turbulent time. For 6 weeks of training, they were tough but transformative. The structure I found instilled a sense of discipline that I desperately needed. This journey resonates with the experience of many individuals in the Bible. It's important to remember that not all figures in Scripture were victorious or virtuous, but when they turned to God and committed themselves to His word, they found inspiration, strength of becoming a great leader. So we're going to look at Joshua. His journey began as Moses' trainee, leading the Israelites into the promised land, requiring immense courage and obedience. Joshua's reliance on God's promise illustrates how crucial a divine guidance can be. Now, just as the military prepares individuals for real challenges ahead, God calls us to prepare spiritually for the struggles that we're going to face. This transformation into spiritual warrior is not easy. It requires dedication and a heart full of prayer. It often means stepping outside of our comfort zones, which can be daunting. Recalling our own experience and my own experience, when I entered the military, there was a significant upheaval. It forced me to leave my past behind and embrace a new challenge. I remember vividly the discomfort of being thrust into an environment where I had to follow orders, adapt quickly, and experience the stark contrast of my previous rebellion. When I look at Joshua, his story speaks powerfully. When God commands him to rise and lead a people into new territories, it's a testament of the emotional and physical leaps that require us to do the same. Many young service members face similar challenges, leaving behind what they knew and stepping into the unknown, embracing courage to fulfill their mission. Ultimately, becoming a spiritual warrior involves recognizing this call to service and understand the leap of faith that accompanies it. It's about transforming our lives and embracing a greater purpose, even when it feels uncomfortable. Our individual journey, we find strength and shared experiences of stepping into unknowns, guided by faith and a desire for growth. Now let me reset my stuff because I'm all over the place. Okay. Let me just put this out there for you. When I joined the military in 2003, I can't tell you how many times I met the law. I think it was 6 total times where I found myself in a 6x6 cell. So I'm just going to be real today, if that's okay. Because you need to understand that through the process of transformation in our lives, sometimes we will go through things before we meet Jesus, before we can be used by Jesus for his greater purpose. And hold on to this. Yeah, I think I have to say this out loud. Not all people in the Bible were good people. When we couple ourselves to God and obey his word, we too can become inspiring, strong, and prayerful. You see, we may not be always good people, but when we couple ourselves to God, we become good people. God moved Joshua to becoming a great leader. How? By moving a group of individuals together for God's mission. We are called to the mission in the mission field, and we all have purpose because God called us. And today I want to give you the picture when we look at the book of Joshua. Joshua comes immediately following the book of the law, or the books of the law, right? The Torah. Immediately following that. Why? Because what the Bible tells us and what we know through historical data is that Moses wrote all of the law. Well, we'll say 99% of it. Bible teacher in the back, am I close? All right. He wrote a majority of the law. So Joshua is being mentored, trained, and led by the person who wrote the book, who wrote the law. Now, the law came from God, right? We all know that Moses met God at a burning bush. He met God at a veil. Like, he met God up on the mountain. And God gave him the commandments. So we get the commandments, which helped us write the law. Okay, all of these things are tied together. But Joshua comes immediately following that. Moses' leadership began with God's response to Israel's suffering in Egypt, called to liberate the people from centuries of bondage. While Moses was called to lead people out of Egypt, Joshua's mandate was to lead them into Canaan, and this is where Joshua guides Israel's transition from desert wanderers to settlers. It was a time for a new generation of leader to bring fresh obedience. But to be clear, Joshua was an aid to Moses. You see, what I'm taking away from this a little bit is that we all have a mission, right? Moses' mission was to take people out of Egypt, through the desert, into the promised land. Joshua, through transition, was to take the people out of the desert into the promised land. See, there's a transition there. There's a part that takes place. And a lot of people go, yes, Moses led the people to the promised land. Hold on. He led them out of Egypt into the desert, and they got stuck for like 40 years. And Joshua's call was to lead them into the promised land. So let's make sure that we're clear on that. We have to be clear when we talk about things in the Bible, because guess what? The word is true. And if we're not being clear in this, we will get confused. When Joshua was appointed leader, he was to lead the people into the promised land. Like Moses before him, Joshua dispatched spies to Canaan, and unlike previous missions, he was successful. That tells us in Numbers 13:14, we see that Moses wasn't successful in sending spies out, but Joshua was. Joshua then led the Israelites across the Jordan, which miraculously parted just like the Red Sea, echoing the earlier crossing. You see, God may have had his hand on Moses, as he did, gave him the law, gave him all of the instructions, but just like you and I, we may be mentored by an individual that is then going to leave their legacy to us to carry on. That's what we see in this. Moses developed a process, instructions. He gave him all the things that he needed. And Joshua, the living legacy of his aide, who was a warrior for Moses, was to carry that legacy on and keep it moving. In chapter 5, We see a pivotal moment as the Israelites renew their covenant identity with circumcision and Passover celebration, representing a new generation of commitment. Before engaging in battle, Joshua encountered the commander of God's army. And this divine warrior's response to Joshua's questions of allegiance, are you for us or our enemies? The angel says, neither. What? Are you for me or them? Neither. I'm for God. So if you're not being obedient to God, if you're not following God's law, if you're not following the mission that God put on you, and you're doing it upon your own desires, your own needs, your own wants, all of these wants for yourself, fleshly desires, I'm not for you either. Be prepared. So we're going to talk about this today. That's my introduction. I have 30 minutes left. Oh, man. But we're going to talk about this today because I think that when we are going to study the book of Joshua this entire month, all right, the first five chapters we're going to study today, because I think that sometimes we need to get lost in the Old Testament for us to really understand why we're doing things in the New Testament, okay? And if you've ever seen one of those schematics where it's like everything is connected in the Bible somewhere, thousands and thousands and millions of connections, this is just one of them. When we look at this story, I challenge you to position yourselves to understand the profound symbolism in this. The wilderness journey can represent our personal lives before we met Christ, while the promised land symbolizes our then invite, obedience, and remaining in Christ. Just as Joshua stepped into the daunting role, believers today, I encourage you to remain in your faith, depending on God and his promise. So, picture this. You're standing on the edge of a river. Okay? Standing on, I don't know, we'll call it the River Jordan. This is where I am. Okay? I'm standing on the River Jordan, and time again, the Israelites failed to follow God's instructions, led to ongoing struggles. And clearly, he gave them instructions, did he not? Clearly, God gave Moses and Joshua and all of his Israelites clear instructions. Be obedient to me, follow what I tell you to do, and you will go into the promised land. But you see, in Numbers 33, 52 through 53, this is what it tells us. Then you shall drive out your inhabitants of the land from before you and destroy all their figured stones and destroy all the metal images and demolish their high places. And you shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land that you possess. Numbers 33, 52 through 53. What is this from? This is from when Moses escapes Egypt, is in the promised land, and in Numbers, they're like, hey, listen, God's like, hey, listen, if you follow what I tell you to do, like, go push all of those people out of the land, and you'll have it. Okay, let me go do that. But instead of pushing all the people out of the land, what did they do? In Exodus, they were like, you could stay there. You could kind of stick around over there. No, we won't kill all of you here. Now, mind you, it sounds like a crazy genocide thing going on, but if you really look deeply into it, what they're actually talking about is killing them spiritually, not physically, for them to follow the law of God. But because they did not do that, and they allowed them to keep things set up in certain places for them, that's why they're talking about destroy all the things that look like other gods. They were not allowed to go into the promised land yet. They weren't authorized to do so. So again, you're standing on the edge of the Jordan River, and the water is rushing by, and the waters surge past, powerful and seemingly impassable. You know that your next step will shape your future. Do you step in? Will you step into the river if you know for a fact that your future is determining or is dependent on you stepping in, But that water is so immensely moving, and you feel like there is no way, and you have fear in your heart, and I can't take the step, because if I do, I'm gone. This was Joshua's reality. Moses is the towering leader of faith, right? Moses was the towering leader of faith. The man who stood before Pharaoh and parted the Red Sea and spoke face to face to God was gone. Now Joshua is there. And now it's Joshua's turn to take the same leap of faith. The same promise God gave to Joshua, he now whispers in our ears. What is it that you're dealing with today that you're so worried about that if you go, if I do it, I'm worried, I can't do it, I can't, and you're going back and forth? What is he telling you today? What is that job opportunity? What is that, I don't know, the scary thing, going back to college or maybe retiring? Like, what is the next big thing in your life that's going to change the direction of you that all of a sudden, if I step out, oh my gosh, God, you better have me. Throw me a life ring. Today, we're going to walk alongside Joshua as we explore this. So the first point I'm going to talk about today is a call to courage, moving forward in faith. We see in Joshua 1, 2, and 3, Moses, my servant is dead. That's God talking to Joshua. That's pretty plain language, and that can make any of us curl our toes. Now, I've received 2 phone calls about both of my parents leaving this earth. It does something to a person. Picture your mentor, your favorite person in the entire world, your spouse, all of a sudden no longer being there, but you need to continue moving on. Emotionally, physically, it will do something to you. But instead of standing still, he tells Joshua, go over this Jordan, you and all of your people, into the land that I am giving you, to the people of Israel. Every place that your sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. What is that? That's a promise. No matter what you're going through, what you're worried about, how you're going to get there, if the sole of your foot touches it, God has already promised it to you for His glory, not your glory. Be careful. Just because you want the job doesn't mean it's your glory. It has to be for God's glory. After Moses' death, Joshua was called to lead the Israelites into the promised land. He was, as nerve-wracking as this is, God has already provided the guidance and the confidence to Joshua. He simply had to embrace it. Sometimes you just got to embrace what's going on. And in verse 3, he says, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you. Like Joshua, we often are called into steps that we are unfamiliar with, but it's time to leave behind the comfort zone. At the end of today, I'm going to share some stuff with you through the announcements that's going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Okay. Sorry, not sorry. Because it's not about your comfort, it's about the glory of God and what makes Him comfortable with what we're doing with our souls for His mission. So we have to have the courage to step into leadership, bringing us to verse 6 in chapter 1. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers I have given to them. Joshua was stepping into the shadow of Moses, but he had to break the stigma and not be the one stepping into the shadow of Moses, but rather be his own person. Be strong and courageous to be your own person. Yes, he had big shoes to fill. It doesn't mean that he had to do everything Moses' way. It's what God was calling him to do and how to step out. Imagine the pressure. Moses, a man who had witnessed God's glory firsthand, now Joshua had to stand in that gap and be the one that the Israelites would follow. He didn't see God's glory face to face. Moses did. Of course they're going to follow Moses. Are they going to follow me? I could ask the same question. Are y'all going to follow me when I start making crazy decisions? I sure hope so. God's glory. And all the people said? Amen. Nice. All right. How could Joshua possibly fill the shoes of Moses? He's not Moses 2.0. God wasn't asking him to imitate. God was calling him for something greater. Some of us are being called into leadership in our workplaces, our families, our ministries, and our communities. The key is not to compare yourself to the ones who have gone before us, but rather be yourself. Do what God is calling you to do. How he shaped you. What is the Spirit doing in your heart, moving you to then make decisions to move your life forward? That's what I think a lot of people miss when they see that. We need to have courage to lean into the unknown. Joshua 1:7, be strong and courageous, being careful to do according to the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Joshua wasn't stepping into a leadership role. He was leading an entire nation in uncharted territory. Today's generation is uncharted. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what they're going to do. We have no idea. But I will tell you this, be strong and courageous. We have to have courage to trust God's presence. Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you? This is now God yelling at Joshua, all right? Have I not commanded you? Hello? Third time's the charm, maybe? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, Joshua, and do not be dismayed, Joshua, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, put your name there. Do not be frightened, Erik. Do not be dismayed, Erik, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Fill in the blank. God's talking to you. Now, I have 5 children, okay, in case some of y'all don't know that already. And my first daughter, Zoe, who's absolutely awesome, 17 years old, loves being really nice to us all of the time. I remember when we lived up in Massachusetts, we sent her to swim classes. And they're like, just throw her in. I'm like, I ain't throwing her in. They're like, just throw her in, it'll be fine. So we threw her in. Think of a child learning how to swim, terrified of water, until they realize that the Father is right there to catch them, holding them, keeping them safe. The fear might not completely disappear, but knowing that there's someone there, stronger, trustworthy, beside you, will give you the confidence to push past. Think about that. So, I have something on my heart for this church, which is to raise disciples up. One of my goals when I came here was to grow this church by 200% in 24 months. That's 88 people sitting in these pews. That's what the God called me to. But it's also to develop disciples to walk with me that might be interns here one day that can then also help this church grow. We can't pour into ourselves and expect ourselves to do all of the hard work. We need to pour into ourselves to pour into others, right? Our cup runneth over into others for them to be filled and do the work of God. Are we leading the people to do the work of God? That's what we see there. As we move forward, we're going to go to chapter 2. This is when Joshua meets a lady named Rahab. Now, Rahab was a prostitute. If you don't know that, that's what she was. That was her job. And we all kind of know what the image might look like to us today in today's society. But let me explain something to you about Rahab. Remember what I told you early on in my story, how I did a whole bunch of bad stuff? And then God saved my life and moved me forward? He did that to Rahab. Joshua 2, we find Joshua sending spies to Jericho, and they encounter Rahab, a woman whose faith in God's promise shines as a beacon of extraordinary courage. Why? Because when the people of this area of Jericho decided to go looking for the spies, they were like, we know they're in there. She's like, no, they're not. They're not here. They left. I saw them. They ran. They went that way. Meanwhile, they're up on a roof, taking a nap. Joshua 2, 8 through 11. She came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, non-believers. She's a believer, but us, as in the people of Jericho, non-believers. And that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings, the Amorites, who are beyond the Jordan. So a little bit further down. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens, above the heavens and the earth. It's like being in a packed stadium where everybody is cheering for you. But you alone see the truth. You alone realize that the other team is about to win. That's Rahab in this story. Jericho is the team that she's on. However, the team outside of Jericho, the Israelites, is about to take and unleash wrath upon Jericho with some trumpets and some marching. Who would have thought? It's like walking around with a guitar and a microphone just going, we got you. We're going to take you down. No boom booms, no nothing. Just singing and praising the Lord. But we'll get to that, I think, tomorrow or next week. Unless you'll want to come back tomorrow. We're good with that too. Rahab's story is a powerful testament of transformation power. God often uses people of simple faith to accomplish his great purpose. Rahab, a woman of a pagan city, demonstrates vibrant faith, and the Israelites, who witnessed God's miraculous power firsthand, often struggled with doubt and disobedience. Why is it that people who get radically saved in the moments are the ones that carry out a mission or believe or obey God so drastically, but the ones that have been walking with God for so long, who know the law, who know the word, who know it all, just for some reason, just don't follow the rules? I don't understand that. Sometimes courage means this: stand against the tide of unpopular opinion. Some of us have to make decisions that are going to be unpopular. Like what to do with X, Y, or Z. Well, we shouldn't do that. Okay. What's right? What's wrong? We'll look at the big picture. And if the big picture says, God, do this, your opinion doesn't matter. God, we're doing this. Now, I'm not saying I make all the decisions. We really actually do have conversations here. And we actually lean into each other, and we say, okay, where do we really feel that God is moving us? And then there becomes some friction, and then we have to look at the bigger picture, and then we decide. But I know that when we walk out of rooms, we're all on the same page because we know that God is making that decision. We might have to risk our reputation for what's right. And we might have to make difficult choices that others may not understand. That was Rahab. Rahab had to make a decision that others of her like did not understand. Like, why are you not telling us where they are? Because God's about to come in here and rain some wrath down. I'm trying to save my life. Let me tie this scarlet yarn on the window so they know where not to go when they show up. Rahab's faith and courage was an act of obedience which changed the course of history. She was spared when Jericho fell. She became part of the nation of Israel. She became an ancestor of Jesus Christ himself. It tells us that in Matthew 1:5. New Testament. Told you to connect it. So then we got to look at, okay, we see Joshua gets appointed. We see part of his mission as he's going to conquer Jericho. But first he has to get there. So how does he get there? He's got to cross the river. This is where a lot of us get stuck. We know what we're called to do. We know what we need to do and where to go. It's just now taking action to go get there. This is where a lot of us get stuck. And this is where he has to cross the Jordan. This is when faith has to meet action. This part of the story will sound familiar to most of us because we can see how God is connected in all of the connections that we're discussing. We've seen how Joshua was called to courage, how Rahab's faith required great risk, and the moment of action has arrived. Israel stands on the bank of the Jordan River, and finally the barrier is going to be broken between them and the promised land. Yet God does not simply remove the obstacle. Did y'all hear that? He's not just going to take it away. It takes action. This is where faith must become one word a lot of us struggle with: believing. I have faith. All of us have faith. We all believe in Jesus. But do we believe that he's going to conquer it all and actually take the step to do so? We have a hard time with that. So let's go. Let's step into the water. Joshua 3:3. We see the officers, the people that, the officers of Israelites, right? The commanders give an order. As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord, your God, is being carried by the Levitical priest, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. You shall. You will. You're going to obey this order. So as they go to pick it up and move it, you're going to go follow it. Y'all follow me, right? This tells me that God has ordered us to sometimes take a back seat and allow for him to drive. I might be in the right-hand seat of the car. It doesn't mean I have the steering wheel or the gas pedal. Some of us may go, slow down, right? And then we start doing something like that, expecting the car to stop. No, it's in God's hands. Hold on, because we going. Joshua 3:13, when the soles of the feet of the priests rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters shall stand in one heap. Meaning they're going to do what? They're going to stop. Now, mind you, rivers only flow one way, which means it's only going to be one side that we got to worry about. So for the ones that get confused that are like crossing the road, don't worry about the one way. Only focus here and see what God is doing. The Ark of the Covenant, which represented God's presence and guidance, led the way for the Israelites. Imagine this, writing a check before the money is in your account. Now, I know I've bounced a check or two in my life before. God is going to be there. If you ain't got no job, that money might not show up. But if you believe in God, that you can be supported, and you have faith that it will be there, I'm not saying, listen, this is not a false testimony here where I'm saying, if you believe that you got money, it's going to show up. That's not what I'm saying. You need to take action for money to show up. Go get a job and do something. Provide for self. Find some side hustle work, because then money will show. Don't get it twisted. Right? I got to be very clear on that. I'm not saying pray for money, it's going to show up on your front doorstep. You might find food if someone's like, hey, this guy just might need food. Okay, you do that. But the Ark of the Covenant goes before us. In the same way, God calls us to move forward even when it's unclear, trusting that his provision will provide. So my question to you today is, what's your Jordan? What are you facing right now? What are you struggling with? What is it in your life that you are dealing with that might be the action step that you're so scared to do? What's your Jordan? We may feel like standing at the edge is overwhelming, and we're going to hesitate, but here's the truth. Obedience precedes the blessing. That means your obedience comes before the blessing. Faith isn't passive, it requires action. And the way forward may not be clear until you take the first step. Those are the three things that we get from crossing the River Jordan. So, again, Joshua gets appointed. We know where we need to go on our mission to Jericho. And now we're going to cross the Jordan, and we're there. We're taking the steps. The Israelites stepped out in faith, and God proved himself faithful, just like he always does. When their feet touched the water, the river Jordan parted, and they crossed on dry ground. This obedience led to the fulfillment of God's promise. That's why in Joshua 4, he commands them to set up memorial stones. Go get it. Hurry up. Go get Jenga. I'm going to show you something. The memorial stones were a physical reminder of his faithfulness. These stones weren't just for them, but also for the future generations coming after them. Faith isn't just about moving forward. It's also about looking back and remembering what God has done for us. Now, I know I said a few weeks ago that, we can't move forward in our lives if we're looking in a rearview mirror driving in reverse. It doesn't work that way. Our lives don't work that way. But I have awesome people that are giving me Jenga because I'm going to show y'all something real quick, which I wish I would have had earlier, but here we go. Anybody ever see Jenga before? Know how to set it up? I'm going to set it up. Can I get a volunteer to set this up so I can keep on going? Come on, volunteer, let's go. Here. You finish setting that up, kid, so I can finish reading. But be quiet. That's too loud. I'm just kidding. We got to remember God's faithfulness and the power of these memorial stones that we're setting up right now. The life that we live and the things that we leave behind for others to remember us by, these are the memorial stones that we're talking about. It's our legacy. It's Joshua's legacy that he's leaving behind. God understands that human tendency is to forget where we come from. Thank you, baby. In Joshua 4, 6 and 7, he commanded the Israelites to erect a monument of stones. These weren't just any ordinary rocks. They were the tangible reminder of his miraculous crossing of the Jordan River. It's a testament of his power and faithfulness. God instructed them, when your children ask, what do those stones mean? You then shall say to them, the stones were designed to spark conversation, ignite remembrance, and to ensure that the future generations would know the story of God's intervention. This, what you leave behind with your walk with God, is what others will remember you by when you move on. So if you don't set up stones, if you don't grow leaders, if we don't grow disciples, if we leave this place untouched, we will have no reminder of where we can go, but what we once were. Now, that's not a bad thing. But it's what the future generation needs for us to do and for them to see. Like if I'm a father that always runs amok like I used to when I was younger, my kids would only know one-way dad, of which he would not be there for them because someone else would have him somewhere else, or someone else would have him somewhere else. I told you the story. My life wasn't always so good. There used to be a lot of flashing lights behind me. And I don't mean the ones that you would see up on a stage. I mean the one that you would see in the middle of in the rearview mirror of a vehicle. So what am I leaving behind? That's what Joshua is telling us here. Think of the family photos scattered throughout your house. Now, we have a massive family photo on our mantle. When I say massive, it's like this big. Okay? It's like 38 inches by like 18 inches. Okay? And it's a picture of all of us. When I say all of us, I mean myself, Rebecca, and all 5 of my children. They capture precious moments shared with joy, enduring love. Our spiritual memory stones should also remind us of God's unwavering presence, his constant love, his faithfulness in every season of our life, and the visual reminder of his promise kept, his battle won, and his unwavering commitment to us. So my question to you then is, what stones are you leaving behind? Have you set any stones in your life up for people to follow? What stories of God's faithfulness can you share with those around you, especially with the next generation? How can you build a legacy of faith, a testament of God's enduring love and power, without sharing it, without providing it, without showing it? You know what? I would even say that we're mandated to do this. We are mandated to leave stones in the past for people to follow us by. This is a tangible reminder of God's faithfulness. And like these stones of the River Jordan, they serve as a powerful motivator, urging us to remember and share his mighty acts. But remembrance isn't just a passive reflection. It's something that allows us to springboard into action. If I know that God can do everything in my life, if I'm moving that thing forward, if I'm moving that mission forward, and my kids come behind me, they go, I saw Dad do it, that means I can do it because God had him, he's got me. This brings us to the last concept in chapter 5. I keep on saying book 5. Joshua had one book, a bunch of chapters. We're in 5. The story of Joshua isn't just a historical account. Hold on. Anybody in here a designer, like an architect? Anybody that like kind of knows how to read schematics? Electricians, stuff like that? Okay. This is a blueprint for our lives. We've seen Joshua's courage and his obedience and his reliance on God, but in chapter 5, there's a crucial element, consecration. It's when we cut off our old ways and we live one new way. It's when we cut off our old selves and we allow God to walk with us and in us. Consecration. They celebrate the Passover. This is specific when we saw in Exodus the passing over of all of the death that was happening throughout the time. It's remembering God's deliverance and recommitting themselves to him. We need to remember and recommit ourselves to God always. This is a ritual of renewal and a spiritual tune-up. Even the mightiest army prepares for battle before a campaign. They strategize, they train, and they equip themselves. How much more should we, as Christians, prepare ourselves spiritually before we face a battle? Sometimes life's going to throw us curveballs, personal struggles, ministry challenges, doubts, temptation. We can't face these battles effectively without spiritual preparation. This means cultivating a life of prayer, immersing ourselves in Scripture, and finding strength and accountability. But the most extraordinary moment of the chapter of Joshua is when he encounters the Lord's army commander. This figure, most likely a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, is what some people say. Some people say that this was Christ before he was Christ. It was the angel of God's army that came down, and he said this. Joshua asks him, are you with us or are you with them? And he says neither. That's why some people think that. Because Jesus is not with us or them, he's with God. And if we follow Jesus, right, we talked about this last month. If we follow Jesus, guess what? We'll be okay. Because we're following his law, his rule, his word. The truth transforms us. It transforms our understanding. It transforms our spiritual welfare and our spiritual warfare. The commander of the Lord's army goes with us, empowering us to be more than just conquerors through him who loves us. You see, when we get into times of our lives where we look at the bigger picture and we say, you know what? God, I don't know if you're for me or against me. Sometimes I have worry, sometimes I have doubt. And next thing you know, there's something in front of you that can actually determine the direction that you go in. When we see in chapter 5 here with the angel of God's army standing before Joshua. What's standing before you? And are you really having this debate back and forth? Are you with me or for them? Follow God. Following God's path will give you everything that you need. Today I'm going to ask you this. God is calling each and every one of us to courage. He's asking us, what's your Jordan? Where are you stepping out in faith? Are you completely trusting him? And are you ready to move on the path ahead? As we reflect on the first 5 chapters of Joshua, we see the roadmap of the journey. We see the courage that it takes. We see the faithfulness that we need. We see the action that has to take place. We see that we need to follow God. And we see that there's no reason or time or place to fall into debate about which way we're going when the God's army is standing in front of us, or his commander is standing in front of us. We just follow the obedience and the faithfulness that moves forward. And this is when I call the worship team to come up. It doesn't say in my notes this time, Willow. So what's the next step for you? What's God calling you to do, and what step is he asking you to take? Is it a leap of faith into a new venture, a commitment to prayer, or perhaps reaching out to someone who is in need? Remember, God empowers us to courageously step out into his promise. Let's trust the presence of God and the Holy Spirit inside of us. Let's not forget that. We need to identify that the one thing that God is prompting us to do, and we need to take action. Write it down. Pray about it. Then take the first step. Step into the River Jordan. Trust in him. God is already giving you the place. Why? Because he's already promised us everywhere our foot steps, he's with us.